Hey everybody, welcome to episode 123 of Tactical Crouch Kick Tripod with Volamel here. Yiska's gone for the week, preparing for his sister's wedding, so he's going to be out of the shows this week. So we're bringing in the best and brightest here this week, the GM of the Florida Mayhem and resident Widowmaker specialist. It's welcome back,
Hello, it's nice to be back.
We're just gonna go in hard on this right away.
You just won't let that one die, huh?
We just need to.
He had all the urgency.
Widow's not even my best hero right now. It's not even close.
Because you don't check your angles, right? That's why.
He's just rusty. He's been practicing other things, so it's like
the thing I appreciated the most is when you were like looking straight ahead as you were walking out of spawn, and so it's like you're looking at a wall for a few minutes or whatever, and he's just like.
I was gonna explain the actual, like, I was thinking like, do I treat this like seriously, or do I just like make fun of it? And I was like, I feel like it's way more entertaining just make fun of it, because I could give you a serious explanation, but like nobody really cares, you know. It's just Kefri accusating someone else, so it's something new, right? Like it's not anything like super serious, but I mean, if you saw where my team was in that particular clip, why in the world would I be thinking a Widow would be above my team on the left high ground when every single Widow plays on the right side? That's why I cleared the right side. I was like, okay. And then I'm looking main because that's where the team fight is.
Big brain.
But yeah, that's the serious answer. But like, you know,
I like the other one. I like how everyone just piled on it.
Yeah. So I'm happy with the, you know, with the memes.
Yeah. Basically, you just play like a bot is what I think is the big takeaway here. Well, yeah, welcome back. Good to have you. I can't remember. We had you pre-May Madness, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
pre-May Madness.
It was
then pre-summer slump for us.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, we did have you again then. Yeah. So. Well, welcome back. Good to see you. We're going to do our housekeeping things really quick, and then we'll jump in. We've got a ton of questions to talk about today. Chat, quit spamming that copy paste. He just talked about it. Chat. Settle down. All right. Big thank you to our patron producers, Battlecrab, Pin, Lotion, Charlie L, Audio, Compass, Workshop, Sammy, Kacha67, Kuchikopi, Sharp Picasso, Nathan Your Misery, Hunter Tane, Refined Bean, Rex Zane, Roger B, Fabled Steven, Owen, Chris, R34444, Yiska's holding me hostage. Please send help. I'm under Yiska's desk. Please send help. Yiska says, Fritcher, Fish. Will the real Chengdu Bob please stand up? Thank you so much for supporting the show. If you like the show, go to patreon.com/tacticalcrouch or leave a sub right here at twitch.tv/kicktripod. We record Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays at noon Pacific. Come say hi. All right. Here we go. Let's talk about the news. And this is kind of a big one. This broke just about an hour and a half before the show started. And that was that the Dallas Fuel have allowed Decay to, what's the right term? Allowed him to release. Walk. Yeah, basically to walk to, he's released from his contract early. And Joe, I'll let you frame up this discussion because I know you've got a lot of thoughts and questions about it.
It's tough because, and I think the Twitter sphere is rightly kind of drawing an eyebrow to how quickly this kind of came out after the closing of the signing window, which was the end of last month, if I remember correctly.
A few days ago, yeah.
Okay. So it's a little coincidental, let's say, that he's let go after the signing window. Nobody else has the chance to sign him. Castro's being very pointed with his explanation. It's tough to even start to speculate because then it doesn't feel right, at least in this scenario, because it is it's very clear that we don't have like the full scope of the story. We have one side of it. Things seem to check out with the rumor mill, but what else is there, if anything? I don't know. It is kind of a precedent to see this being, or to see Hastro kind of come out and really explain their side of the story and be, pointed and kind of saying like, hey, Decay like would not cooperate. We thought it was in our best interest and his as well to, part ways. So then it's like, okay, at least for me, kind of got my head twist or just kind of thinking, and I'm like, well, we have a GM on the show, so let's ask the GM, like, okay, if this was to hypothetically happen, what do you do? Is this something that like you're kind of aligned with, where it's like trying to be fully transparent, or do you just kind of like keep it not behind closed doors? It seems kind of shady, but like just leave it as is.
I mean, you want me to game this or game theory this? So, I mean, that's easy. Sure. Like when the first news came out, it's like, first of all, let's assume this was inevitable, or like, okay, so there's two scenarios. Like one, there's more than two scenarios, but like first scenario is like, the assumption is he's wanted to be released for a long time. He has been practicing whatever, and he's been asking to finally granted his request, but after the signing window, right? Like, I feel like every fan is like, has to be how it happened. So, I mean, that's plausible. And as management, if you had to release a star player, and there was no other like recourse, like you couldn't get him back, like the relationship is so broken,
sure,
then yeah, like the correct decision from like a competitive standpoint is to not let another team get the chance to use, that player against you, especially with playoffs coming off, right?
Sure.
So sure, from a management, like from strictly like a performance standpoint, definitely, logic dictates you release the player after the signing window, right? That's one version, that's one possibility. The other possibility, like I think Hastro said, like, oh, we basically granted his request like the moment he or not the moment, but like shortly after he requested it. I think that's plausible as well, because I think a lot of players don't really like, it's my job and it's other GM's jobs to know when the signing window is, but a lot of players, like, they don't like, that's not something they need to pay attention to normally.
Sure.
So I think it's entirely possible Decay just got fed up but didn't realize that, like, maybe had he gotten fed up earlier and actually tried to get released, he could have gone to another team, maybe. But and then there's like my perspective, right? It's like, look at how many players we kept last year. Like, I had a lot of tough conversations last year. We were the worst team in the league, and I managed to keep all the players, right? Like, sure. I didn't have to release anyone. So that's my perspective. My perspective is like, I don't know. I have no idea like Decay might be a special like one-off case, or a special case where it was a unique case. You couldn't repair the relationship for whatever reason it was broken. I don't know the reasons why it was broken, but from my perspective, it seems like I find it hard to believe that like it's not. There has to be some fault on the management side or the way the staff has handled the situation for it to get to the point where they're releasing a star player that they traded like OG for, right? Like, they traded a huge piece of their team last year for in exchange. So yeah, those are kind of like the top three like thoughts flowing through my head when I like saw the tweet, saw the release.
Yeah, to your point, like, I think it is definitely on the Dallas Fuel management, at least part of it, right? I don't know that anybody in situations like this like completely shoulders the blame. I think both parties probably didn't play very nice. Just again, completely speculative. I don't think it's right to say that it's just all Dallas. I don't think it's right to say, oh, Decay should have played. Like, that's what your contract says. Like, yeah. Again, this is one of those things that just falls in the middle. We probably won't ever get to know, and it's probably never our right, or it's not our right to really know exactly the ins and outs of it. It could be incredibly highly personal. But it is strange that this team has a tendency, or has a history, of just having irreconcilable differences with star players. Could just be coincidental. It's just a weird trend.
Yeah. Well, one more thought. I mean, it seems weird that they would release him instead of trading him, right?
Sure.
At least to me, like, because I think Decay has a lot of value on the market.
Oh, certainly.
and it just seems so. Maybe Decay. I don't know Decay personally. I don't know anything about Decay, but maybe this is like maybe I don't even want to play Overwatch. You know, like maybe I don't want to even be on another team. Right? I think I think because there's usually players ask to get out of team. Players usually ask like one of two things: either I kind of want to retire, or like let me out of the contract. I hate being here. But usually players that ask that like to leave, it's just because they have no other options, right? Like they don't have other teams that would be interested. I don't know if they explored like trading Decay. I'm sure I would have, like, had I been in that position. Like just, hey, like what, he's not happy here. We're not happy with him. He's not showing up to practice. Like, let's trade him, let's trade him to someone else in exchange for a piece or, a lot of cash, something that can help our, either financially or help us, in a playoff run scenario. So that's what I would have looked at. So like, I highly doubt they didn't look at that, unless there was like good reason not to, as in like Decay, maybe he just doesn't even want to play the game anymore. I don't know. But that's something that we won't really know until kind of the offseason plays out, I guess, and just sees if he even comes back to Overwatch.
As the news develops, as the story continues to unfold, it will probably get a little, again, this is not something that's just going to be surface level. This is going to be a nice little rabbit hole for us as we lead into playoffs. It's sad. Yeah. It's sad to see that, Dallas and this kind of a fun roster that had a lot of potential. Again, I highly rated this DPS line coming in. It was kind of hard not to. Granted, I wasn't too big on some of the other pieces, but when you have Doha, who had a great weekend, which we'll get into, and you have somebody like Decay, who has a ton of potential, which I think we really only got to see a little bit of this season. Yeah. It's hard not to get excited. So it's sad to see. But hopefully he stays in and we get to see him in 2021. But
I will say, as an org, I think Fuel has generally like been viewed like pretty favorably in terms of taking care of players, like paying them like decent salary, and the house. Like I feel like their apartments are always nice. Like sure. Their house, like it seems like they do like, and they have a lot. Like I don't know, they have a lot of players on that roster that I don't, arguably I probably maybe might have released before they released Decay. But hey,
sometimes you just gotta do what you gotta do. Sometimes things happen. So it's sad. I don't know. It's disappointing. I'm sad to see such a good player potentially just leave entirely. Again, like not being able to play for the last bit of the season.
I think if it does come out that like if he's not back in the league next year, I think that casts like a different light. Like I think that's just like this guy was tired of the game.
Sure, of course.
And then I don't think you can really attribute too much fault to like how are you going to get as an organization like a stat if a player just loses all motivation, like you just let them go, right? I think that's what you've seen throughout the season when people switch to Valorant or go somewhere else.
I can't imagine how much more difficult that conversation would be too, is even when they're not playing the game, they're still like considered the X factor to like what takes you from win to loss. So how do you motivate someone on like a team that's losing or underperforming, especially when you're not there, and then trying to get them to want to play the game. So can't have been an easy conversation. And like I don't know, it sucks because I think that to your point, Albert, like Dallas has largely been viewed favorably, especially in like how they take care of their players. They had some early stuff early on in season 1, I think, like that's like the Kai days and stuff like that. And I think a lot of organizations had a ton of growing pains there. And so to single out the Dallas Fuel is probably a little bit unfair in that. But especially after they were called out on it, Hastro and crew made some really great changes. And it still kind of brings us to the point, though, is that this is a team that has kind of, I think, failed to meet any sort of expectation, right? They signed Envious, arguably definitely the best Western roster that we saw in Overwatch, pre-Overwatch League. How many of them who's left now from the original Envious roster?
Envious?
Is there anybody?
Harry Hook.
Harry Hook. Harry. Yeah. Oh
That's
man.
about it.
I actually wasn't ready for that gut punch today.
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't ready for that.
I do think hindsight's 2020, right? But I think looking back, Envious had always been a team that just got away with not having the meta piece. They're just like, oh, let's just play like 2 hit scans, or like let's just play like
Reaper,
Taimu Junkrat. You know, like let's just get and as long as Taimu was just like a top widow, I feel like they got away with a lot of things. They just got away with murder. They just got away with like just playing whatever they wanted, right? And I think that was kind of the theme for a while. Like you look at Selfless, like I don't think. I mean, you obviously can't because it's 2-2-2. But like, I think there's a reason you didn't really see any sort of like Selfless style team season 1, because like that just doesn't work when you're against like the best competition, like the best player,
totally,
as opposed to stomping like a region or like stomping NA. Not to say they didn't win in Korea, like they definitely did, and I think that kind of like carried over eventually to the hit. Like they finally reached like their ceiling. It was like, okay, this no longer works at this level. Like we can no longer get away with not having like a sick projectile DPS or a sick flex DPS.
That's a good thought. That's a good thought. It's just, it's kind of a bummer to see. And I think, I think that Dallas might want to look at trying to take a page out of the Florida Mayhem book, honestly, as far as like, how do you rebuild a team that, this is a team that signed, or an organization that signed the Envious roster to pretty long contracts and pretty generous contracts as well.
Yeah.
They underperform. Yeah. They're at a point now where Tickety is gone today to, we don't know any information about why or how. All that they've said is that they're going to post later this week. They're putting together their thoughts and that they want to come back to Overwatch League. But there's this, there's an obvious need right now that Dallas is like, they haven't been able to fire on all cylinders, and Florida just a year ago was dealing with an issue like this where you weren't able to get these wins together. You had some really promising pieces to the puzzle, and you were able to turn it around, and here you are now in the end of the season, or nearing the end of the season. And I mean, I'd have to double check the standings here, but you guys are 6th in the league.
Definitely up there.
With including bonus wins, I've got 6 in the league for you. So, I mean, that's really amazing.
Yeah, it still hasn't set in yet. Maybe in a year I'll be like looking over my shoulder and like not be looking over my shoulder. I feel like now I'm just like when are we gonna do that again? Like, when is it gonna happen? When's the other shoe gonna drop? But so far, I've been really happy with our team. I think part of it is luck. Like I definitely don't want to say like I'm just a giga brain and like everything worked out perfectly. Like I'm some sort of genius. I think definitely luck is involved. Definitely luck in terms of like, did anyone see Kuki being like a potential coach of the year? I certainly didn't when I signed him. Like I didn't, and I couldn't because I've never seen Kuki coach. I'm not Korean. I've never been in a position where I'd like even hear, even if I had a VOD where he was coaching, I wouldn't be able to understand what was going on, right? So, and I did like a ton of interviews when I was in Korea, and I was like, okay, I need these players. I need these runaway players. Kuki seems like a good coach. How much of those runaway wins can you attribute to Kuki when they were just dominating before he even coached them, right? So yeah, I think definitely luck is involved, for sure. I think anyone that tells you otherwise is too far up their own ass.
I mean, yeah, I think that's fair, but there's some eye to this, right? Like you knew where to go. You kind of, again, like I wouldn't completely discredit you, and it'd be kind of interesting, again, theoretically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on where they want to go. It seems right now Dallas wants to do a mixed roster.
Yeah.
And like I've built a mixed roster before. They're a little finicky, or not. I don't want to say finicky is the wrong word. You need the right personnel.
Sure.
You need to have like, because Korean culture and like Western culture are very different. And you need to find the right mix of players that are willing to like give and take on their side. Like Koreans just want to grind super hard, and they like if they don't see you working, it's it rubs them the wrong way. Whereas I think if Western players like you're working too hard, you're like that's not efficient, right? So it's like for Western players, like more is not always better. Whereas for Koreans, like if you're not doing at least this much, like why you're not putting in enough effort. So I think finding the right mix of talent to gel together is always hard because you don't know how that's going to work out, and then plus like getting the staff as well. So it's really it's not easy putting together a cohesive mixed roster. Like what Paris has done is not easy at all.
Yeah, that's feels like a flash in the pan. Again, credit to them. I think a lot of people had a lot of skeptical eyes around that roster and if it was going to work and how long it would work if it did. And they've built something crazy. And
I think they've turned like not that they weren't grinders before, but like I see Nico, like Nico's grinding like nonstop on the lab. Like he's like never before, I don't think. So I think once you get buy-in from everyone on a mixed roster, like then sky's the limit, right? Like you look at Shock, you look at Fusion, right? Some of the most successful teams in the league right now, in NA at least, aren't full Korean. So it's definitely possible. It's definitely doable. But you need to get the right mix. Is
there kind of and again, maybe I'm looking too far into this or not giving this enough thought, but do you think Dallas for 2021 needs a healthy dose of buy-in to kind of get everybody motivated who's left over in the postseason kind of rebuild? Because again, Ticketty's now gone. What else happens with this roster? Again, there's a lot of people on this roster that are not interesting, but what's the nicest way to put this? Probably will not be there by the end of the season, right? Like I think it'll be surprising, right? If they last. So like where's like the trait on the RPG stat list where you go, okay, this is what this roster, this is what Dr. Albert says, this is their diagnosis.
Always with the RPG.
Hey, come on, bro. Come on now.
I mean, first you got to figure out, like, I don't know Hastro. I don't know the NV org, like what their goals are, or Dallas rather, what their goals are. Like, are their goals to be like the best team? Is their goal to be the best, like, mix? Like, what are they looking for a team? Because like, there's definitely business decisions when it comes to making rosters. Like, hey, we need to be more marketable, or we have sponsors that, we need NA talent, or we want Western talent. We don't want to go full Korean. So like once you have those parameters in place, then you can begin to think about like what type of team you can field. And then you start looking at like, okay, if you're going to be a mixed team, let's get these, like what coaches, like what assistant coaches out there, like assistant coaches out there, you look at, does anyone want them to take a shot at head coach? Like, who's making the roster decisions, right? Yeah. Like is it Era right now? Is it Hastro? Is it Tasmo? I don't know personally. Because I don't work with Envy. But Hastro recently stepped down into like this chief gaming officer role, which, does that mean he's back, super hands-on with field decisions? Or is that still, someone else's purview, someone else's day job, right? I don't know the answers to those questions. So I need to know like way more on like how everything's structured. For me, it was like how we did it over here was, I was like, okay, I'm the GM. Like we don't have a head coach. Like we need a new head coach. We need a new revamp the coaching roster. So it's basically all on me. And it's like John, who's like my direct boss, is the president of Mayhem. Like he has kind of like, he just gave me autonomy. Like, hey, you know more about Overwatch. You build this team, come to me. Like we trust that, you can do a good job and figure it out. And then I went to Ben for kind of like budget approval. Right. But that was the process on our end. So it's very, very streamlined, very like a lot of it just rested on my shoulders. And I was like, yeah, like totally get it. Like, obviously it's my head on the line if, things don't work out as it should be. But if my head's going to be on the line, like I need to have full control. Right. Yeah. I need to have agency. So I, without knowing what the social, like the power dynamics are on I can't really give you a good answer. Because there's a lot, like there's three people that potentially have varying levels of authority over like what players they pick up, and the budget and everything. So Yeah,
that's fair. Again, totally fair. It's tough to be able to do anything with this because A, it's still developing, and B, it's so one-sided right now. We don't really know what else is happening. Is he, like we said, kind of just leaving Overwatch? Is it just coincidental? There's a lot of question marks, a lot of what ifs. So you can't not talk about it, but
I really hope Envious has built up like an amazing content structure for, they've got the studio, they've got Jane and Avast in there.
Sure.
I really hope that they take this opportunity and like create some really great content around it. And it's weird. It's weird to bring content to your I don't want to say failures, but perceived failure. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say, right? But it would be, there's, if you look at the community today, this morning, you have speculation run amok, right? And you have a few kind of canned tweet responses. I think Hastro used this tweet. Lots of fuel added to the fire today, pun intended. We will make some major changes and get back into the fray. Thanks for all who have patience, working hard. Expect a lot of news for the team and sweeping changes. Isn't that almost what we got last year? Isn't that like?
I mean, that sounds like it has to be either they're dropping a bunch of players or they're adding staff because like they can't add any players anymore.
Yeah, no.
Unless they've signed a bunch like under the radar that just haven't been announced yet. That's possible, right? But I don't know. Yeah.
But they've got this content house. I would like to see them come out, address the situation, like get Hastro up in front. Like, even if you've got, Jane and Avast who are on the payroll anyways. So like, obviously you're going to try to paint this into the light, but like, I kind of am sick to my stomach thinking about the next 4 days of just rampant speculation on Reddit and everywhere else. And like, even we're doing it here right now where we're kind of like speculating, like, here's where it's stuff. And I think like, Albert, you've done a great job of just like, well, you don't know. I'm a GM and even I don't know. Like, what else can any of these other people know? They can obviously speculate, draw 2 and 2 together, say stupid things like, you got to be stupid to not see that Dallas has a culture problem because they lost this player, this player, this player. Yeah. And you start to like create this like just annoying churn and echo chamber that I'm just kind of like, so like, Dallas, make some content on this, please. Or have someone come on the show and talk about it. I don't care. But like, just... Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's get these kind of decisions out in the open a little bit more and give people some transparency.
I also think one aspect of this is that like this seems like deja vu because it's happened before, right? Or in at least from the fan perspective, right? Like season 1 you had Effect, and then there's Rascal, and now it's Decay, right? It's like the third time like a very talented DPS player has mental boomed or like irreconcilable differences with the org or the staff. So I think that's like the angle I think a lot of fans and like are taking, like, oh, this must just be like, this is now like, a Dallas Field trend, right? So I think that's like, if I were to like approach this from like a PR standpoint or like, hey, how do we manage like the public reaction? Like that's where I would start. Like, how is this different than like what happened to the Rascal issue? What happened with the effects? I don't think those were even ever explored, right? Like, I don't think they've ever like discussed publicly, like, hey, this is why it didn't work out with Rascal, because like clearly Rascal is a champion now, right? Like, it wasn't the talent. And with Decay, it doesn't seem to be talent either. And then with Effect, I didn't seem to be a talent. Like, they won so much with Effect.
Sure.
So I think that's where it would start. Maybe I don't know. A little bit of transparency or just like an explanation on that this is a unique situation or something. These are the reasons why it broke down. I don't know. They don't really owe anyone any explanation. But I think if they were concerned about like how the public's taking it, that's where I would start.
Yep.
Definitely. Well, Dallas, best of luck to you. I hope we hear more about what you're doing. I think there was a lot of us who had high expectations for Dallas. Admittedly, Decay was a huge part of that. But we'll
get to some Dallas hope. I got a little hope. I agree with the German curmudgeon that isn't here today that maybe there's a little bit of a take delay. Maybe he was right. We'll see. I don't know. I'll pick Albert's brain on that later.
Fair enough. Well, let's go in and let's talk a little bit about I don't know. Let's actually let's talk about last week's matches a little bit, shall we? And sure. Some of the meta stuff going on and everything else. And we'll just take it right from the top. Joe, I think this one's yours. Junkrat, eh? You're really gonna bring us down to Junkrat topics on this one, eh?
We got some new rat play, and I need to hear exactly why. I have my ideas. I think it's probably pretty decent into a lot of the brawl comps that are being playing on in Control, but we're also seeing it off of Control. So I'm interested to see what Albert has to say on this. Where do you sit on Junkrat?
There's been a lot of there has been, like, that's the right take. There's been a large, quite sizable increase in Junkrat play, especially on the Koth maps.
Yeah.
And I definitely expect that to continue. But like the eventual outcome of that continuing is probably you're gonna start seeing like Pharah. Because that was naturally like Pharmacy comps were the natural like counter to super bunker like Sim Junkrat strats on like points like Nepal Village, where it's just like a tiny box, right? It's just like tiny Overwatch, and then you can't really play Pharah on like Control Center Lijiang, which is the other like super popular Junkrat map in the past. So I think it's a natural like evolution of, okay, we have BAT, we have this lamp that's now being placed in positions that are like out of LOS of like a hit scan, and you want just like more. There's so much healing that you want, like Junkrat outputs so much damage, and it's like you want like pick opportunities, and you're running like death ball stuff. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Sure.
I think, but then it'll get to the point where then teams, once you lose enough times in like the Junkrat mirror, then you'll start looking at like other solutions to the problem, which I think back to like Pharah being played on. Or used to be being played on Nepal Village.
Yeah, that one's definitely again another point that we'll get to with Houston a little bit. Interested to see, because that is kind of playing out specifically in that match versus Valiant. I believe Valiant kind of came out first fight with that pretty quickly, and it was kind of interesting to see how Houston approached that. But
it's just map geometry, because I think a lot of the maps it's being played, it's just close quarters combat. Pretty much the entire map. There's not really any long sight lines. So yeah, there's multiple corners. What's the best thing to hold corners? It's like spam, right? You just throw a bunch of like spam at around a corner, around LOS, and it's a lot better than dive or
sure.
Yeah,
totally. It's kind of interesting because we've seen it both ways with the Junkrat, where we have seen it kind of being played into these brawl compositions. We have seen it being played into Winston Zarya. I hesitate calling it dive because it doesn't necessarily always have to be played like dive, it looks like. Your team, obviously, one that I've been interested to kind of see. Very, very short and stubby jumps from Fate. Again, it's not dive, but we always want to attribute it as like, oh, well, Winston, he leaps great distances and the Tracer meets him and they get the kills happening, but it's not always the case.
It's just different because the heroes are different. Like Lucio's not really being played, and yeah, Tracer's not always being played, so it's not traditional dive. But when people see Winston, they automatically like the first word they think of is dive. So
most certainly. So I'm glad to see that the idea with like this general like Junkrat kind of Winston Zarya. It's nice to see that like a meta has kind of stabilized throughout this patch without hero pools, and it's kind of fun to see just a general trend of shakeup that isn't just directly attributed to hero pools. That it feels a little bit more natural. Certain teams are finding success with it, certain teams not so much. They're finding their own kind of path to success. It's kind of nice. It's fun to see your team also one that has their own little flair with the double flex support on certain maps that is interesting. Brigless. But yeah, it's just kind of a general, like, how do you feel? Is that something you kind of sympathize with? Does it feel kind of fresh? Does it feel not genuine, but grassroots? It's kind of just happening on its own.
You're talking about the comps that are being formed?
Yeah, just stuff
I mean,
that isn't specifically just one generic hard and fast meta. It's kind of evolving a little bit.
Yeah, I think I think this is exactly what I predicted when I like suggested the 2 week, because I was like, I don't think teams figure out I know teams don't figure out comps in 1 week, and it's very obvious. Every time you saw like the week, they were playing such a wide variety of things that it's like there can't be like nobody's figured out what's really good and what's bad, right? So I think this week is no different. This is the first week of no hero pools heading into the Countdown Cup, and we saw a lot of different comps. Some were more like APAC inspired, so like the Winston Zarya is something that APAC's really been doing. We saw some ball, so we're seeing a lot of different looks, and I think that's precisely as expected. It's only been a week. Teams need more than 1 week to figure out what's the best, or what works the best, and then kind of your plans don't really survive first contact, right? So like now that's in a match environment, like okay, maybe it worked in scrims but it doesn't work in matches. Why? Like because the other comp's just better, because we played it wrong. Is there a better comp we can run? Is there a comp that like another team ran that looks really good? So yeah, I think that's kind of the case, right? And I think when you look at our main melee run, we identified, like, for us, we play around, like, at the time we played around like Brig Armor Tracer the best. So it's like that's why we were like I think during the main melee, I think most other teams were running double flex. I know Atlanta was running double flex against us, and I think Moth was running Zen at the time. So they're running
Seems to check
Zen.
out.
I'm pretty sure they're running Zen Bat when we played the Shock. So yeah, and I think now it's like, for us, it's not new. Zen Bat's not new.
Sure.
By any means, but like it seems like everyone moved on, or not moved on, but like has adopted Brig. And then for us, we're like, okay, like let's try this Zen Bap thing, and see if it works out for us. So I think it's something that I completely expected. We're still teams in the league are still figuring out what's the best comp for them.
Yeah, and it's nice to see, and I'm glad that we do get to see it, because it's always fun to like see everybody's own little take. It isn't just, I agree with the community sentiment that they're very kind of scared and polarized about, what GOATS was and how hard and fast that was. But Rollock can do a lot of different things. I don't think we really gave it enough time to breathe, and I think we're starting to see the kind of fruits of the labor of hero pools of the Rollock, and we get these fun little interesting looks. Florida is running a very, similar composition to teams like Atlanta, teams like, just your generic kind of meta composition, but they have their own flair. Houston has their own flair. Dallas, in a way, has their own flair. It's nice to see. It's a fun time to be in Overwatch. It's a fun time to kind of just consume that. But in that same sense with the meta, one topic that kind of has rotated around is this idea of having a star Genji right now. Do you think, or where do you kind of weigh in on the topic of having like a very mechanically proficient Genji player? Obviously, you guys have Yaki, not Kuki. He was a tank player.
Yeah.
Haven't slept yet. Forgive me. But where do you kind of fall on that? Is Genji super kind of stupidly important, where you need somebody to kind of be that carry player to kind of make those decisions that only a Genji player would know?
I think you need to have someone that can play Genji. Does they need to be a star Genji? No. I mean, just look at Chuck, right? They don't have a star Genji player, and they still win all their matches. So I think it depends on your team and what your team, the talent level on your team. Like if you're like Shock and you're stacked at the other 5 positions, you just slot in, a person that can play Genji. They're playing Genji, but it's like they're not necessarily carrying the team. He's not pulling off like Sparkle level performances.
Sure.
Unless it's against Boston, right? But against like your an average mid-table team,
yeah,
he's not pulling off those performances. Like you look at Houston, like Houston kind of shut him down, but they weren't able to shut down the rest of the team. So it's like they don't really need the carry Genji. They need a Genji because it's like better than any other hero. But yeah, I think you just need someone that can play Genji. And there's ways of winning games without just your Genji doing everything for you.
Sure.
And I think you see that, right? Like, for example, now Philly's back to Genji because Genji's just such a good hero, and Ivy's really good at Genji. But prior to that, they were just, okay, let's just run double hit scan. Let's just make Sombra. Let's make Sombra Tracer work. Sombra Ashe, Sombra, Widow, right? So there's definitely multiple ways to win. It's just Genji's meta because it's much harder to win the other ways, unless you have like a very, very good team.
For sure. And it kind of transitions nicely into kind of the first match I wanted to kind of really pick your brain on was the Houston Valiant match. And we did kind of see this different look. We did see both teams run very standard meta compositions, but we saw Houston kind of break out the Sombra to like a pretty resounding success. I think there are other reasons why Houston didn't necessarily clutch out the win at the very end, but
yeah.
Do you think that this team is positioned to do very well in this kind of like off meta look with the Sombra? They seem again to kind of fit the bill everywhere else, where they can play the double shield pretty okay. We'll get to your thoughts on the Winston play with Houston, but generally speaking, do you think that they could pilot Sombra to like a high degree and maybe edge out some Genji compositions?
I don't really think so.
Okay.
Because I think the issue is Dante's also their best Genji player,
right?
And he's also their best Sombra player. So, and I think if they had a really good Genji player, sure, maybe they can make because Dante's a really good Sombra. But not that Linkzr's Genji's bad. It's just I think Dante's better, and I'd rather have the best Genji on the field as opposed to like a Sombra and like the second best Genji. So, yeah, I think Houston's just the ultimate like wild card team. You don't really know what you're gonna get out of them. They can play up to the competition, or it seems like they always have the ability to play up to the competition.
Sure.
Just not sure if that'll happen in the match. Yeah, I just view Houston as like a very wild card team. They always have the upset potential, but the question is like, I think they basically go into every match as an underdog, but always with the chance to upset. That's kind of how I view Houston in my head.
Yeah, I think that kind of checks out for me. Not specifically, but kind of finding their own style along the way. Did see a little bit more Junkrat out of them on King's Row. Looked solid. Kind of caught the Valiant and looked like off guard. Couple strange swaps. I don't know if you have too many thoughts on the Widow Diva Sigma or the Widow Diva Orisa composition they kind of used to try and beat this weird Junkrat stall on point A and point B. Does it kind of check out? Do you feel like Diva is the right fit on some of these bunker comps, or do you feel like a more of a comp switch needs to happen?
Diva's just a garbage pick on KR.
Okay,
it's just terrible. I don't think you should be playing Diva over Sigma ever.
Okay,
and especially not in King's Row, which is such a linear map. It's like the whole map just like a long tunnel, right? It's just a long hallway, essentially. And I don't think Diva gets much value there, especially when the other team's playing like heroes that have so much damage output, like Genji, Ashe, and it's just a bad time for Diva. Sigma offers the same, plus like better team fight, plus it's the better ult, and has a stun. Like it, you just shouldn't. I think had Valiant just played Sigma on King's Row over Diva, I think that they would have easily won that. I think the most tragic aspect of Valiant's performance was that C9 on Gibraltar, where Rain was nanoed and he just goes hunting off the cart, and they C9. Like all he had to do was stay on the cart and keep swinging, and they would have won that point. Now, maybe they would have gotten held on third, but they shouldn't have the map shouldn't have ended on the hanger for Valiant.
You bring up Gibraltar, and I know you mentioned Diva, different map, different composition set for that map, but does Diva kind of come into favor a little bit more on that map, especially on point A? I know that historically you've always wanted to kind of juggle the cart, especially goes under car wash. Is that something you still think can work?
Yeah, definitely dive works on Gibraltar because the verticality. There's so much when you have more verticality on the map. That's when like Diva can shine. That's when your dive, the Winston can shine. Gibraltar's always been like a decent dive map, or not decent, a very good dive map, like a dive plus like hit scan carry map because there's so much high ground, like the shuttle and everything. So yeah, no, definitely Diva's fine on Gibraltar. I just think for low like flat maps like KR, it's just not great.
Makes sense. Any kind of general thoughts? I know that obviously Team Scrim and Play and heard that Houston does well. It just seems like they can't. At least my speculation. I'll take this. They don't translate what they can do to the stage. Where do you kind of fall on that? Do you have any thoughts, insights, ideas on why Houston isn't necessarily gelling? It felt like this past week things looked a little uncohesive, like the the gears weren't necessarily. Yeah, it's not great, but where do you kind of fall on this?
I mean, at least this time they actually won. They actually won it, then lost it, as opposed to like the Dallas game where they just lost. Like they didn't have it the win yet. They probably could have gotten the win if their Doomfist was on point, because I think they were up numbers.
Yeah,
they hadn't actually won it yet. Whereas they literally like had the win right there, and they just like put their hands off the keyboard or something and just dropped their spaghetti everywhere. But I think it's very hard for teams to perform like they do in scrims. It depends on your team, right? Some teams perform better in like a match scenario. Some teams play and other teams, just pop off in scrims and they don't do well in matches, or they don't do as well. And I think I can't speak for every team, but I think most teams struggle with this to some degree. Like for us, I'll say like this week, like we were pounding in scrims, but Glad's like, I think the Glad's match should have been 3-0, but it didn't. It obviously wasn't. Like we struggled at points. Hanamura was a shit show for everyone involved.
Sure.
But yeah, it just like sometimes it depends on the match. Is just different. Like everything, you can be so prepared, but then when it hits, like we can talk. I think we talk about our match later. So I'll kind of hold my thoughts for then. But
okay,
every team goes through this. Where they're like, okay, we were pounding in scrims. What happened during the match? Or like, wow, we got bodied in scrims, but like it doesn't matter because we won the match. So I think it's just a matter of translating. Every team has problems or different issues on the spectrum of translating. Some people don't calm very much in scrims and then calm too much in matches, and that throws the team off. And some people play super aggressive in scrims and just play very scrimmy, but then when they hit the match, they don't play like that anymore. Like they go back to old habits where they're like, okay, it's a match, like I can't die, like I can't be aggressive, right? Whereas in scrims, it's like there's no pressure. You just go balls to the wall, and you can just dominate in scrims, right? But then when he hits match, then like what happened to your Reddit Lucio? He's not like Reddit Lucioing anymore. He's just like, right? It's just different. And a match is always different than a scrim. And it's just a matter of the great teams like are consistent in scrims and consistent in the match. And I think it's just Houston's not yet there. And just a normal like mid-table team that is struggling with inconsistencies in scrims and matches.
So Houston themselves, they ended their regular season, right? Because they're done. They don't have any games left at 6-15. Do you think, based on all the time you spent scrimming with them and stuff, do you think that that's kind of the right final ranking for them, or do you think that maybe we should have seen some better results out of Houston?
I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head because I haven't seen their strength of schedule. Like I don't know if they've played more of the harder teams in the league.
Sure.
And I think I would like to know that before I can give like a assertive answer. But I don't think it really. I don't know. They have hydration and maintain. It's like that's like not something you could have really seen coming into the season. Like when you're predicting, like, hey, how is Houston going to do this season?
Right.
You don't predict it with hydration on main tank in mind, right? So, but yeah, I think middle of the pack is where in my head I place Houston. I don't know if 6-13 is middle of the pack or like bottom.
6-15 is currently right now 17th. You have Uprising, Justice, and Titans below them. Hunters, slightly above them. Spitfire could still technically lose all 5, but they're pretty much locked in, I think, at this point.
Does Defiant have more wins than Houston or less?
Defiant have more wins. They're 8-12 with 2 games remaining.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that answers the question, right? I think of Houston as a mid-table team, but the results don't indicate that they're a mid-table team. So I think that's that kind of answers the question, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely underperformed, like no question.
For sure. Joe, any other questions about this Houston Valiant game?
No, I don't know if you have a ton of thoughts. I thought it was really strange. I know that we talked about like the Junkrat and the Widow kind of dynamic or dichotomy. Houston rolling out on Junkrat and then going back to swap to McCree and staying within that brawl kind of archetype and then pushing through stairs into the Pharah was kind of weird to me. I don't know. Maybe you could kind of give some insight. I know obviously former pro player.
Yeah.
Very, very skilled in that sense. Why exactly would you want to kind of push stairs and not go directly to point to kind of like abuse the map geometry to kind of limit the Pharah?
Well, you don't limit the Pharah if you go to point. If you go to point, Pharah just spams point. Like the Pharah doesn't have to do anything. Doesn't even have to think. They just spam point. I think that the issue. This is Houston versus Valiant, right? Didn't. And you're saying in Valiant ran. I don't remember this particular fight, but you're saying Valiant ran Pharah. I think in my head, I'm thinking of when they played Shock and Rascal was pounding them on Pharah. That's the Nepal I'm thinking of. Wait, are we even talking? We're not even talking about Nepal, are we?
No, yeah, I believe it's Nepal.
Okay.
Yeah, first fight on Village.
Yeah. I don't remember the Houston Valiant Nepal that well. Because in my head I was thinking of the Houston Shock one, which sounds like a similar scenario where
I think so.
They went back to spawn because like, oh shit, like we're just gonna get pounded by Pharah if we play Junkrat, which is that's like the like flowchart Overwatch that happens there when is usually you go straight to point. You cap it first because the Pharah needs to work up to barrage. Once Pharah has barrage, you lose the point instantly, and then you have to swap your entire comp. So that means you exchange 20% on the point for like for 0 ults because like you have to swap your like DPS comps and then you have to retake with no ults. So that's definitely like good call, like good coaching to like, hey, you see Pharah and you're on Junkrat, like go back, like swap to a hit scan. I don't remember exactly what happened, how they were dealing with the Valiant Pharah, but I know the issue. Like I can definitely point out like the issue with them against Shock is Repel was just not healing his team. He was just DPSing Rascal, who has a mercy pocket. He's never going to kill Rascal.
Right.
But like he built like Nano just completely off of DPSing Rascal, and that just means his team's not getting any heals, and his team can't push. Like it shouldn't be on him. It should be on his DPS to kind of poke out the Pharah. He should not be 100% focused on DPSing the Pharah. It should be like, okay, you get an opportunity, hit him with a 1 tap, maybe a 2 tap, just to keep him honest. But otherwise, like he should be focusing on healing his team and like pushing with his team. But he was basically in spawn, like just playing 1v2 against Rascal and Moth in the air. It didn't really make sense.
No, I think that definitely checks out. It's kind of a specific insight, but I think that summarizes what I wanted out of it. It's an interesting little thing.
You can't go to you can't go to point against Pharah on Nepal Village. In short,
makes sense.
In conclusion.
In conclusion, let's talk about your match against Glads this week. This is a ton of fun, but I think maybe before we talk about Glads, let's just I want to hear your thoughts. So let me make sure I get these right here. So let me go to my schedules here and make sure I get these right. So you go deep in Melee, right? Do really well, beat Rain, beat Fusion, put up a great fight against the Shock in the grand finals.
Yeah.
And Summer Showdown, what did you call it? The Summer
Slump.
The Summer Slump. You lose to Houston round 1 and you're out. Since then, you're 3-1, playing against Justice, Gladiators, and Rain, only losing to the Shock. As we're going into Countdown Cup, how are you feeling overall about your team, your chances. Obviously, I don't think you're going to go be like, I think we're going to suck and we're going to slump in the first round again this week. But, how do you feel about...
we can't slump in the first round because we don't
have a bye. That's fair.
That's true. Yeah, you do have a bye. So I guess first game would be the right match. But how are you guys feeling going into that? Do you feel pretty good about your chances based on where the meta is and kind of how you played over the past month?
Yeah, I mean, I think scrim's been going well. Like, it just took us a while to adjust. It took us longer as a team to adjust to the Genji meta. I think that just explains the we didn't commit to the Genji. And in hindsight, maybe we should have. But also at the time, there was, I believe, Brig Armor is still a thing, right? At the time,
I think
at that patch, I think so. So then it was like, okay, maybe we can get away with Tracer. And I think other teams had similar ideas as well, like Shock, right? Like Shock had this idea. Like, okay, we'll just get away with 2-hit scans because it worked in the past. So I think it took us a while. Not a while. It just took us a little longer to not immediately adopt the Genji. Like, hey, let's play Genji. Right. Yeah. So I think now that we've had way more weeks of practice with the Genji, I feel much better, much more optimistic about kind of our chances in the cup. I think, I hope, and I think we're gonna do well. But we'll see. I think we definitely need to play better than we did against Glads to kind of make it through. Because the Glads game was scrappy, and we definitely had opportunities to execute like a lot cleaner. Definitely a lot of times where we got picked too early, and gave easy picks and just kind of let the Glads take advantage of that through like our own errors. But basically I'm optimistic. I think we at least get to semis. It'd be a huge disappointment if we don't get to semis. And then semis, I think we're up against Shock. So hopefully we get, third time's the charm and we're able to beat Shock this time. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's Shock. So, I think I'm probably not sober if I'd say like
I appreciate just like
we're gonna beat Shock with like complete certainty, right? Like I think we can beat Shock. Will we beat Shock? I mean, that's up to the team. Like I'm not gonna make any promises on that front.
What promises can you make us?
I said we should get to semis. Like, I don't think it matters if we're 4th seed, so we don't get a pick. So I think the strongest team will fall to us. So probably Atlanta or Glads. And I fancy our chances against both of those teams.
Certainly.
So big question for me is like, can we beat Shock? That's the big question for me.
I don't think it's necessarily out of the realm of possibility. It's definitely one of those matchups, kind of going back to that Genji question. It's like, okay, you have a team like Florida that can pilot the meta in multiple different ways, and then Shock Super's Genji is serviceable.
Yeah.
That's kind of been established now. They've used it. It works as well as it can. I still don't particularly think it's great. It might be the best that they have, but I think that says something. It's not necessarily discrediting the rest of those pieces, because the rest of those pieces are fantastic. Some of the best in the world, maybe the best in the world, but it's going to test that kind of theory of, if you don't have that kind of playmaker Genji, can you afford to have that playmaking role on another hero? Will it work on other maps?
Yeah.
I'm
Did they run
inclined to.
Did they run Super Genji against you guys?
Yeah, they didn't play Super against us. They played Tayo. 4 maps.
And they played Super, I think, a map against Houston. Is that right?
No, they played Super 2 maps against Houston. He played Genji on Gibraltar, and then he played main tank on KR. Yeah. So yeah, they did run Genji against us. But I think that match was also like, it's when we just made too many mistakes. Like we weren't. I think I already talked about this previously on some other point. But we just weren't. We were letting Valiant get away with murder. We weren't really pressuring him, and we were playing kind of scared. So I think that's just like bad habits coming back. And if we can just like not play, like I think the first time we played against Shock, like in the May Melee, like we played like reckless. Like we didn't give them any respect. Like we were just going at them, right? And I think that's the kind of tempo like you need if you want to like same thing with like Paris. Like when you watch Paris or Shock, like the tempo is super high. You gotta run. I think to beat Shock, your team has to be playing at a tempo that's uncomfortable for them. Because the Shock already play at like a pretty high tempo, but they play at their tempo. And if you let them get comfortable, that's when like they're just too good of a team if they're comfortable to not get the win. So I think making them uncomfortable, putting them on the back foot's like the only way to beat Shock.
I'll go first. Do you notice any sort of additional like mental obstacles when going up against a really great team like the Shock, maybe the Paris Eternal, now that they've got some, really decisive wins on the belt and kind of separated, I think, from the pack of like the top middle teams? Do you notice any sort of different mentals from the players, and do you do anything to try to compensate for that, get them in the right headspace?
Well, I personally don't do anything since I don't.
Sure.
Yes, I mean, I think Cookie does a great job. Like, he was a player himself. Like, he knows what the players are feeling. He's very in tune with like their emotions and what they need to, what they need to hear. So he's like serious but like lighthearted at the same time. So like he'll say something very serious but in like kind of a joking manner, which kind of appeals like to players. Like he can cut, like if the energy is like super down, he has this ability. Like I think every good coach has the ability, right, to talk their team back into existence, like back from the brink. Sure. So I think at halftime, like he's really good at motivating the team and getting them refocused. But I think he's working hard like all year. I think one of the, yes, we kept a lot of like players from our last year's roster, and yes, we're good. But one of like the downsides to keeping a roster that was like not great is there's a lot of like deeply ingrained habits that you also need to break. Because I think you look at us the first like few months of the season back when homestands were still a thing, that was so long ago. But we were like a very slow team. Like we were just a garbage. We were like a budget version of Nixel in terms of how fast we're playing, which is not good. Like that pace is like not good. So, and then as I said, like I think the last time I was on here, like that was like the beginning of when our pace kind of ramped up, and kind of the pace where every good team plays is like much faster. You're making fights happen a lot quicker. You're bringing it to the enemy team. You're being proactive in your fight selection, and you're being smart. And I think, and instead of just letting the other team do whatever they want to you, and then you play reactively. So I think that's kind of like what Cookie's been great at, like been working at all year. Is just, hey, like remember, like we play at this speed now. Like we're a good team now. Like make sure you guys can do this. And like don't be scared of the other team.
In that same way where you're kind of preaching this kind of very proactive and setting the tempo high. I know that the Titans, not to completely derail from the Mayhem, because I do want to return to them. The Titans were kind of dabbling with some McCree and Genji and playing a very direct and engage focused style of this current meta composition. Do you think that has some legs to stand on certain maps where you are kind of disallowing the Ashe to kind of set up, kind of not mitigating, but limiting exactly how and where the Widow can really work? Do you think like this very direct, like brute force style could benefit some teams?
I think personally, I think McCree's inferior to Ashe in the meta at the moment. Ashe just provides better team fight potential. I think McCree's better if they're playing like dive, like if there's like a tracer, maybe, and or it could just be like Shockwave's better at McCree than he is at Ashe. So it's maybe it's that simple, right? But I think generally, all things being equal, if your Ashe and your McCree play are the same, you should be picking Ashe over McCree when you're pairing it with the Genji.
Okay. Now to kind of return to the Mayhem, we did kind of reference this earlier, but you have your own little look. You have this double flex look with Byram coming in, who, like I say, had a fantastic week, played very, very well. Yeah. Do you, obviously you're not the coach, like you said, But is there a good chance that we will see this style continuing? Is there any room for Brig? Obviously, you guys did play it, but it seems like you guys are very comfortable with both the Zenyatta and the Baptiste. Is that kind of the mission statement moving forward?
I think that's what we've been trying. Whether or not scrims this week will dictate what we run in the actual cup. So yeah, we'll see. I think we're back to the lab tomorrow. Today's our off day. So I don't know what we're gonna, I don't know what we're gonna run.
Sure.
On Friday, or not Friday. We don't play Friday. On Saturday. And I think that's, for me, that's been part of like a nice surprise. Like, I watch scrims, but like I'm always pleasantly surprised at like the strats they roll out. So it's been fun from my perspective, just to like get that like fan feeling again, even though I'm part of the team. Just to see what comps we're running, what kind of strats we're running. But yeah, so like I probably see Zen Bap. I mean, we'll definitely see some Brig play. But I think right now, Ikugi's identified that like this just works better for us. So that's why we're playing it. And other teams are still sticking to the Brig Bap. And we've kind of, at least Cookie thinks Zen Bap might be a little bit better. And gives us a little bit more flexibility, since we weren't really running Lucio. But also, like, as you saw, like when we're running Lucio, like it's Ganonjin on the Lucio for Koth. So maybe we see more Ganonjin Lucio, maybe not. Maybe Chris is back in for Koth. We'll see. A lot of unknowns this early on in the week.
For sure, and we know if everybody starts playing double flex, we know who to call. We know.
As I said, we weren't even the first. We're late adopters. Okay, like Melee, it was being run already. Atlanta and Shop.
That's true.
Double flex. We're just the only team. I guess we're just rebels. We're the only team running like Brig Bap really for Melee, and then for now approaching like last week, we were like one of the only teams running Zen Bap. So who knows? Atlanta could definitely do it. They have 2 flex supports again, since they picked up Iris. So we'll see.
Yeah, the Countdown Cup's coming, and it's again, shout out to the league. Thank you for the tournaments. They're fantastic. They're definitely a nice little treat at the end of the month to have some nice Overwatch, have some good Overwatch, and it's kind of needed after this last week, because it wasn't great. Credit where credit's due, and curmudgeon when you need to. It wasn't fantastic. It was a little dull. So ready to get back into the swing of things.
I thought Albert was supposed to be the curmudgeon.
No, that's me.
Jeez. All right. So I do actually want to circle back on a point. And Dasef asked this in chat, and basically you had mentioned that the really good teams right now, Shock and Paris, have this much higher tempo of play. Sure. And that's part of what makes them so good. Any insight as to like why? And I think that this is something we've talked about on the show, and it's just kind of like a general attribute of a team like New York Excelsior. I think are a great example of a team that it historically has performed well, playing a much more slow and like methodical game play style. Is there any reason why you think that that's changed, or that's no longer really relevant for the Overwatch League, or the Overwatch that we're playing now at a competitive level?
I think there's certain situations where playing reactively is fine. Like when an enemy has, or the other team has like Nanoblade or something, and you try to you position in a way that's a little bit more reactive because you have to. I think that's fine. There's still room for reactive plays. There's still room where reactive setups are, probably the best option. But generally speaking, being reactive across like entire series is just not great. Because when you're down ults, you should be trying to force the enemy team to make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And you can't force the enemy to make a mistake when you're just not doing anything, when you're waiting for them to make a mistake. So instead of, hey, let's do this, then and put them on the back foot, make them react to you, it's just a lot harder. Because like when you initiate contact, like you're forcing them to like think about what they're going to do in a reaction, right? Whereas if you're just waiting, you don't know what the enemy team is going to do. You think you might know, but you're just letting them get the timings right, like get a surround, and you're just giving them time to execute what they want to do, and that just doesn't really make much sense when if you have the talent. So it works well. Like Nixel was super talented season 1, and it's like it probably doesn't matter what style they play. They just chose to play that style. Like regardless, they could win. But had that team, imagine that team, like they did really well in the regular season. So I guess you don't really have to matter doing well. But like how much more dangerous more dominant they would have looked had they played like super aggressive, and more proactive, like kind of the way Shock always plays, right? There's like a ebb and flow.
I've never seen Joe so excited on the show, by the way, than when you talked about a decisive NYXL and an aggressive NYXL. He just beamed like sunshine rays.
Like you watch Shock, like there's very little downtime. They're like, okay, next thing we want to do, go. Like next thing we want to do, go. Like Smurf pressuring, striker pressuring. Whereas with Nixel it was like a lot of just waiting around and just like backing up. And like you can only back up so far until you have to take a fight. And I think a good example of this is us from our match, actually, bring it back to what we were talking about. That second point defense we had on Nimbani was one of the worst things I've seen our team do. If you remember that, we didn't take a single fight. I think they bongoed like first corner, then they like windowed second corner, and then that was the second point. Like we just didn't take a fight. And I think Yak had Blade like that entire time. So like that's like precisely why playing passive doesn't work. Because you play passive, it goes to a point where they're just cycling ults on you, and you're just like, oh, we don't want to risk like going in on this, or like we're just gonna let them execute on us. Like they just chain like ults on the proper corners, and then you just end up not even taking a fight because you're waiting for like the perfect opportunity to like pop a blade, or you're waiting for the perfect opportunity to engage. Like make that opportunity, just go. Take the fight at the first corner because you know it's good, and you give yourself opportunities to for them to use their ults in a way that is not like as perfect as just bongo first corner, like window second corner, and then that's the second point attack, right? So I think that's precisely why I think passive playstyle is just not good.
It kind of comes back to something I'd kind of attribute this to Yiska and talking about asking teams questions in a metaphorical sense, not literally. But when you play aggressively, when you kind of play proactively, you're immediately kind of coming to an answer rather than, like you said, kind of sitting back, waiting, taking the information that you have and trying to formulate what the enemy might do. And they don't necessarily have to play by your rules, let alone just play by the heroes that you think they're going to play with. So I generally agree that playing aggressive, playing forward, playing, in a simple but eloquent way, just go is a good mantra to, I feel like, live life by.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, I think it's better to be like if you could only choose one style, aggressive is always way better than playing passive. Like just perma aggression is better than like. So you look at kind of Valiant. Like Valiant's almost like the perfect example of this. Like everyone's like, oh, they're like outperforming expectations. Like look at the way they play. They're like one of the most like aggressive teams in terms of like when they choose to go, they go at you like super hard. And it's 6 people going at you in like one moment. And I think that's like that gets them in trouble at times. But that's also like how like a big part of how they've been able to like surpass expectations, just because when they get aggressive, like they get aggressive, they force mistakes out of the other team.
Yeah, checks out. I mean, even going back to, back when the home stands were still around, you had Gig charging across ponds. You really did have all 6 people running at you in compositions that you wouldn't normally expect it to. So it's definitely changes the tempo. And I think it's a good way to put it. Puts it in your favor.
Yeah. Joe, as we're kind of wrapping up here, any other last questions? Chat for you all as well. Last questions for Albert as we kind of wrap it away.
I feel remiss not to kind of give Dallas a little bit of, quick little hopeful love. I know that Decay, leaving the team is a big downer and to be expected, but to Yiska's credit, talking about take delay, kind of came into this and was high on them versus Philly, and I believe predicted them against Atlanta. Interested to see your thoughts on some of their creative usage of Ana, specifically on Watchpoint Gibraltar. Had this very interesting, I don't know if it was a set play. It seemed to happen quite often where Crimzo would find quite a sizable biotic nade and then would nano Doha in a kind of acceleration sense to kind of like pseudo engage, but that kind of screwed up their nano blade rhythm. I don't know exactly where you fall in that, kind of like theoretically speaking. Where does that sound good? Do you think it could be usable?
So in theory, it should be better. Because if you can win a fight without blading, and then you have blade for the next fight, that means you basically want 2 fights with the same amount of ults that you otherwise would have used to just win 1 fight. Because blade's powerful enough without a nano.
Sure.
So I think that's just in a perfect world. Like if you're hitting like a 2-man anti or like a 4-man anti, and you're sending your Genji in, and he just dash resets on them and then builds his blade off of that, and then blades the next fight, and you win that fight. That's 2 fights for when you would have just otherwise won 1 if you use both ults at the same time. So I think in theory it's better. In practice, it probably doesn't work like that, or it definitely doesn't work like that. But I think in theory it's sound. So that's just in my head, like
Sure, yeah, of course.
If you're min maxing, it's like, okay, well, instead of using nano blade, why don't we just nano a naked Genji, build his blade for the next fight? As long as we win that fight, then we can just keep that going, right? And you don't even necessarily have to nano Doha into that. You can nano like Winston into that, right? And nano anything into an anti-nade stack, really. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like poor. It's just
okay.
Yeah.
It's definitely creative and
it's idealistic. Yeah.
Yes, it's perfect Overwatch to kind of bring that back. I've kind of foreshadowed this with the Titans talk, but looking at a team like Dallas that obviously is going through a little bit of tumultuousness with Decay and whatnot, they have been playing, like you said, high tempo, very, very fast rhythm. They're taking engagements and they look in certain fights really, really good. Obviously, they're still kind of getting their legs under them. Is there something that you feel like they could run to kind of help them get there? It might just be very one-dimensional and kind of generic, but is there some sort of weird, again, I'm going to throw something out there, it might not even work, but some sort of weird like Genji Reaper on certain points where you can just bust through, take these really kind of direct engagements and really force the tempo in your favor, and then maybe swap to Ashe? But kind of where do you sit on that?
I think Field just has a spacing issue. Like when I watch them play, they're too grouped up. They don't take space, and they're too grouped up. And when you're too grouped up into Ashe Genji, you're just gonna get bladed over and over again. You're gonna get dynamited over and over again. I think that was like the main issue.
Okay.
I saw like it seemed like Onigod was like really playing like inside of his team instead of like trying to take an off angle or they were just basically playing in a stack, and then Doha was kind of like on his own. But you kind of want both their DPS to like to control space, and I think it was just Doha, and when it's just a solo Genji, like when it's just a Genji on the flank and like you're not dealing with an Ashe from another angle, it's just a lot of pressure on Doha, and an ability like it's easy to focus fire when it's just a 1 in 5 or 5.
Yeah, definitely kind of checks out because he was getting picked quite often earlier in the week, and then versus Atlanta still kind of taking some L's. But again, I think he and Onigod both had pretty impressive performances. Onigod specifically against Philly had quite a few little moments. I think again Dallas could have played and positioned a little bit better. I think they negated a lot of their picks just from where they were taking their fights. There was one fight in particular, I think he got like a pick on the Sombra or somebody. It might have been the Genji. Just diving him on the high ground on late Gibraltar A, kind of on the rafters. And Dallas decides to take a fight in server room, kind of like limiting where he can kind of position where he can take these fights. And that's when Fury kind of really starts to ramp up, gets the energy and kind of just pounds with a numbers disadvantage. I mean, generally it makes sense, right? You have the numbers advantage, you want to take the engagement, but do you think that, again, throwing team fights out there, just kind of describing them, but is that kind of check out? Like, should you really be taking a fight in an enclosed space against a Zarya who's going to have high charge and limiting your own Widow? Do you kind of let them come onto cart, try to capture them there? Like, what do you do with that?
Is this Gibraltar? Which map is this? Gibraltar,
late on A, Widow's on high ground, just gets a pick. Philly's rotating into server on attack, and Dallas is choosing to engage into them. Do you feel like that's a correct choice? Do you feel like it limits the Widow? Maybe that's just me.
I think you should be pressuring them, but like if it doesn't look like a fight that you can win, you shouldn't just like 5v5 in the room, because that's what you're doing with the Widow. Yeah. You kind of want to just make them at least fight them like at the choke. Like with you want to fight them. You want to every time you have a Widow, you should be playing in the Widow's sightlines unless you have like a big numbers advantage.
Right.
So generally speaking, I think or unless you have ults that you can use in that room.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's just a decision making error. It could be, I don't know what the comp structure is like. Maybe Paint's calling it. Maybe I don't know who's calling for Dallas and who's calling the engages. Might just be that. I'm still thinking of like the Atlanta game in my head, where it just seems like they were just too clumped up, and Doha was like trying to play the game at a different pace than the rest of his team, and I just don't think it really. They should be trying to be playing as aggressive as Doha is playing, but like as 5.
Sure.
Because I think Doha was like doing really spectacular like flank Genji stuff, but his team wasn't always there. Like he was just on a solo mission a lot of the time. Like in Hanamura, I think a lot of time just kind of on an island almost, and that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, to that, I think it's a nice way to wrap up. I think Dallas has there's a little bit of something there to give fans hope. I don't think all is lost. I think I'm big on the creative use of the nano engages. I think it's an interesting kind of look. It could kind of set teams off kilter with how and where you're taking your engagements. It seems like Crimzo can very consistently find these nades when playing the kind of Winston Zarya, Winston Diva style. It seems like that's where they're most comfortable. So I don't think all hope's lost. I think, a good week of practice. Hopefully this Decay dues doesn't necessarily get to the mentals and get to the morale of the team, because it could be a dark horse performance and looming.
I feel like it doesn't. It's probably the team members have probably known about this for a while now. So this probably I would be very surprised if this was news to anyone on the team,
right?
Because especially if what Hasher says is true and he wasn't showing up to practice and he just wanted to leave. Like, I'm sure everyone on the team was aware of this way before it was announced. So I don't think it will affect the mental any more than it already has. I don't think it's going to get worse because they're probably have been processing this like outcome for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, not to completely go back to Decay, but it's sad. But I think Dallas has some hopes going into the Countdown Cup. I don't think all is lost. Got some interesting looks. As long as they can kind of tighten it up, I think they might turn some heads. I don't know if they're going to win anything. I don't know if they're going to win the entire event. Might not even get it out of qualifiers. But
who do they play next?
Let's see. They play Justice. So again,
that is a very winnable match for them.
Very winnable.
I definitely predict them beating. I definitely would have them over the Justice
for sure. Yeah. Especially after the last performance, I think they look good. And again, not easy teams by any means. Again, I think people are kind of down on Atlanta, but their match versus Philly was, I won't say close, but again, there's stuff there.
I was very surprised that Valiant picked Houston instead of picking DC, because I personally would rate Houston above DC in terms of strength.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, definitely fortuitous for DC to drop all the way down to Dallas Field. Yeah.
Granted, this might be a little much, and you can completely decline to answer, but do you guys have a working kind of like flow chart onto who and where you might be looking to pick come quarters? Or granted, I guess if you're 4th seed, like you mentioned, that you might not necessarily get to pick.
We don't get to pick at all.
Yeah.
I think we either play Atlanta or we play Glads. Just that simple.
Fair enough.
Unless someone's trolling, unless Shock, Paris, or Philly pick better teams, or pick Atlanta or Glads for out of hubris or something. But I really doubt that they do, since this is like the last cup, and so I anticipate a rematch against Glads or Atlanta, depending on who's third. Philly, I think.
I believe
Philly
so.
is third.
Yeah, depending on who Philly thinks is stronger, we'll just get whoever's. Depending on who Philly thinks is weaker, we'll just get whoever's left. And I think Glads and Atlanta should win their matches, unless, right?
They
Atlanta
should,
plays Titans.
But Defiant, we saw Defiant last month go deeper than expected, right? We've seen Vancouver go a little bit deeper in some of these matches recently. Like, I wish I could say that these we had May Melee, right? And May Melee was the higher seed always won. Always, all the way through for NA, right? And then Summer Showdown was, I don't want to say the opposite, but it felt like there was a lot more upsets and a lot more, at least if you look at the seeding, than we've seen. I mean, there's like, it's no secret that Atlanta has been shaky. I don't know if that's enough for them to lose against Vancouver, but Vancouver has clicked in a couple of matches that have kind of made you go, huh? I wonder. I don't think that that's the upset here, though, but I do look and see, like, could Outlaws just boom Valiant? Could with a decayless fuel, could Justice sneak one away?
Maybe, but what I'm saying is, like, as long as there's not 4 upsets, we're gonna get the strong team. Like, there's gonna be one strong team, and we're gonna end up with the strongest team. So literally, the upsets don't even matter to me because we're not gonna benefit off any of that. So that's why I think, regardless of what happens, I think we get Atlanta, we get Glads. That's that. I think
that's probably true. Yeah.
And again, all doable. Those are very winnable matches. Again, Florida just coming off a win, and Atlanta. I know I just said people are down on them, but again, they're kind of the consistent team.
I would take Mayhem in either of those matches.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're dangerous. Like, Atlanta has new players. Like, honeymoon periods are always good. There's always a honeymoon period for every roster.
Sure.
And varying levels of the performance during the honeymoon period. But I think every roster, when they get new blood, has a honeymoon period.
Is there any insight as to, like, why you think that is? Is that something that you think is unique, more unique in Overwatch?
I don't think so. I think it's just usually when there's been roster shakeups or when new people get introduced, it's because of underperformance. And then when you inject new blood, it brings new perspective. Like, they, totally outside of the bad performances prior. And if it's a move that, like, players in the team are also behind, then it's just getting to play with a new player. Like, everyone plays Overwatch differently, different personalities.
Sure.
And it's like starting from a fresh slate, right? It's like, okay, everything's new. We're working from ground zero. We have confidence. Usually, it's an upgrade, or you think it's an upgrade on paper. There's always a logical reason behind why new blood gets introduced. So it's like, okay, we should be better. Therefore, we play better. And then eventually you play together long enough, and, like, issues will always arise, like new issues that eventually come to surface. But for the honeymoon period, it's fresh for everyone. It's fresh for the player that gets introduced is really hungry, wants to keep the spot, keep the opportunity that they have. So I think honeymoon period is not really unique to Overwatch, but just the human psychology.
Makes sense. Last question or topic before we go. Recently we had the end of season playoffs. So you've got NA and EU, or not EU, NA. I'm so used to talking about Valorant now that everything's split in NA and EU, and we don't talk about APAC and Korea. NA and Asia. You have two separate playoff brackets, and then the top two teams from each go to a semi-centralized location for a semi-online grand finals. What are your overall thoughts on the format overall, and have you booked your tickets yet?
I mean, we'd have to finish. No one's booking their tickets until the playoffs happens.
I was just joking. No. Your confidence. Show me the confidence.
I'm not that type of person. I'll tell you what I actually feel. I'm not gonna lie about. I'm not gonna lie about.
That's fair.
Yeah. But I wish it was LAN. End of the day, I do wish it was a true LAN and not online play. Feels kind of shit. But what can you do? 2020. There's a pandemic. There's a global pandemic. You do what you have to do. It's better than nothing. I think it's certainly better than two different champions in like two different regions. So it's better than that. But yeah, I think as long as this was like the best that Blizzard could do, and I think it probably is the best that Blizzard can do, I'm fine with it. I think having a unified championship is important. So yeah, you have like a real champion, and then I think the Final Four format is great. I think me and Roston discussed it before submitting it to the league. Hey, like it'd kind of be cool to have like a group, two from each, because I was like, he initially, like when we were asked for feedback, Roston was like, oh, it just seems like kind of anticlimactic to. I was like, yeah, it's definitely anticlimactic to just have like one match in. When there's like two regions with different play styles, you could say like, oh, NA has 13 teams, so like maybe we get more. But end of the day, it's like, I think it's still fine. Because the strength of like the APAC teams are apparent. I think most people think the average strength of the teams in the APAC region's higher than the average strength of the NA teams. So I think that's fair. I think the same way as well. So I think it's fine to have two from each region.
NA definitely is. They do have a couple of anchor teams, don't they?
You can say that.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think that's largely kind of on par with kind of, I think, where people are at. It's like, who are we to complain? Like, yes, there's criticisms to it, but at the same time, you know what? In 2020, I'll take just about anything at this point.
Yep.
You just don't cancel my season. Don't it is kind of interesting that all teams, right, are able to kind of get a shot. But I think I think that was the only thing that I saw that was like, I guess that point kind of makes sense. Yeah, why should every team get a shot? At the same time, I get the league's kind of approach to it of like, we've changed so much. We've done so much. Like, let's just give people, let's just hope that the system, holds up the competitive integrity to the point that where we get the right teams qualifying, and we don't feel like we end up getting the wrong teams in playoffs and grand finals. So
yeah, I think generally from NA, it's like there's like 4 top teams, right? I think general consensus. So I think having half of those top teams compete with 2 of the top teams out of the other regions is perfectly fine.
Totally. Yep. All right.
Big agree.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. Big thank you to everybody who hung out today. Albert, thank you for joining us. It was a ton of fun. Before we do get out of here, as always, we like to give you a little opportunity to shout out some of those Mayhem fans who have joined us, and anybody else watching the Mayhem as we go into Countdown Cup and end of season playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a former Dallas Fuel fan, that's looking for a place to join, hop on over. I think I already got one on my Twitter feed.
There we go.
That jump ship. So if you're looking for a life raft, perhaps choose the pink one.
Or a Widowmaker coach.
Yeah, or yeah, or maybe I start my private coaching career. Who knows? But yeah, follow me on Twitter. Yeah, with 3 H's. And yeah, looking forward to putting on a show for our team to put on a show this weekend.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to you, and thanks again for coming on. Let's go ahead and finish out the episode. First, big thank you to our patron producers: Battlecrab, Pin, Lotion, Charlie L, Audio, Compass, Board Shop, Sammy, Kasha 67, Kushikopi, Charles Picasso, Nathan Misery, Hunter Tane, Refined Bean, Rex Zane, Roger B, Fable Steven, Owen, Chris R34444, Yiska's holding me hostage. Please send help. I'm under Yiska's desk. Please send help. Yiska says, fish, and will the real Chengdu Bob please stand up? Thanks so much for supporting the show. Go to patreon.com/tacticalcrouch if you want to support, or subscribe right here at twitch.tv/Kickedtripod. Thanks to everybody who tuned in live, and thanks to the new subs. Joe, who do we got?
Yes, we have P_Scott15. Thank you for your subbage. Count Baculum, Aaron Hazard, Coppers,
Ernie Hazard.
Skeptical Cly, Ernie. I'm sorry, Ernie Hazard. Voyager Overwatch, or OW rather, and Sparky's Shocker. Thank you all for coming in with the support. And if obviously COVID's a thing and pinching some pennies, you can't support monetarily, you can always go on iTunes and leave a 5-star review, and helps us with discoverability and all that jazz. So you can still support the show if you feel so inclined.
And I missed this one, Joe. My bad. Chonk did toss us some 40 bits as well. Thanks, Chonk.
Thanks, Chonk.
Appreciate you. Joe, shout out for the week. Where do people find you? What do you got going on?
Yeah, this week it's on the socials everywhere. Writing some stuff coming up. Got a feature coming out about Alarm in the works. Doing a little bit of Valorant thingamabobs, and then doing what I do best and going back in the history books and looking at why Kongdu Panthera never captured a title. We're gonna go back and look at that team and just dig up some fossils. It'll be a good time. But yeah, that's the itinerary for this week.
Nice. As for me, you can find me everywhere at Kickedtripod. I'm a little bit busy. I haven't gotten to do any supplemental content. Katie and I started taking Japanese lessons, and it's been a ton of fun. But we had to take the accelerated 1 and 2 courses. So instead of 7 weeks, it's 5 weeks. So all my spare time has been studying. It's been so much. So that's kind of what I've been up to. I also, though, on a Race the Mayhem note, I hit my half-year goals for strength, and we're down 12 pounds. So I got my power dots. I got my little congratulations presents.
We need a graph. I want to track who's actually keeping pace.
I'm keeping pace with you guys, man.
Okay.
I'm well past you.
Well past us. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm happy about, because I was like, I don't know, midway through the season, I was like, nah, I don't know about Mayhem. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe I need to race a playoff team. This stuff's kind of falling off. But yeah, no, definitely keeping up. But got a nice lead. I
only pledged a pound per win, and so I fluctuate between 12 and 16 right now. Is kind of where I'm hitting at. So we'll call it as good. We're there. So yeah, so far the Mayhem have been raced, and so been doing that
in a pandemic. No,
in a pandemic, it's kind of
just organic, organic at home, losing weight. That's impressive.
I did. Well, it was nice. Our gym, we have a CrossFit gym in our building that we go to, and I help do a bunch of digital strategy for us. So they help us out with our memberships. And they let us borrow equipment and dumbbells and things like that, so we could go to the top of our garage and actually do workouts, which is pretty great.
You work out on the top of your garage?
I live in an apartment complex, so it's a parking garage.
Okay. I was like, what?
There's a ladder involved.
Ladder. It's Incline. It's called incline training. It's a new thing. Very dangerous. Yeah. So we did that, and then Katie's cousin works for Peloton, and so I'm like, Katie, I can't keep up with the mayhem as we go into here. But Katie's cousin works for Peloton, so we got like an insane deal on a Peloton bike.
So you're just juicing essentially. You're
so
just
I'm just like, hey, you made the race tough. I am not a tortoise. I'm a hare. Wait, no, I am the tortoise. I'm neither. Neither of those work for this one. Really bad analogies either way. Chat, thanks so much for hanging out. Hope you had an awesome time. Yes, go to bit.ly/TCP shop if you want your Race the Mayhem shirt, by the way. It was pretty cool.
Ooh.
I designed it. I think it's one of my favorite. It's one of my more favorite like designs, and I just haven't gotten around to order. Or I keep like going to order it, and like I run into like I can't remember what it was last time, but I didn't buy it, and so I need to buy it. But yeah, so chat, thanks so much for hanging out. Everybody listening, you guys are awesome. We love you. We'll see you on Wednesday for the preview show for Countdown Cup playoffs, and we'll probably have another guest because Yiska's gone, and Joe and I left to our own devices is not good. So we will do that. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.